Welcome to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where destiny brought together three friends to enhance each other's cinematic journey by watching three new movies in a series of themed rounds. There is no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode, as all film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy! Hello and welcome back to another episode of Three Films and a Podcast, the show where three friends challenge each other to broaden their cinematic horizons through a series of unique themed rounds. My name is Ben Lawhorn and I'm coming to you from Salt Lake City. As always, I'm joined by Tyler Beck up in Oregon.
For the last time in Portland, Oregon.
The final PDX show.
For those watching on YouTube, you'll notice the guitars are gone from the background. It's a very sad background, but that's
everything's getting packed up.
Yeah.
I'm excited for new backgrounds next week.
Yeah.
It'll be good.
It'll be fun to check in from the road.
Coast to coast. Yeah, and our own little space ghost here, Matt Weiler, down in Pleasant Grove.
Hi, guys.
Nice.
Hello.
I like it.
For those of you new to the show, welcome to the movie club. For those of you returning, welcome to the movie club. I'm glad you guys are here. What began as a club between the three of us, just a really long group chat, has evolved into this podcast that you're listening to right now. So thank you so much for joining us. You can find us anywhere on social medias at Three Films Pod. Instagram. We got a TikTok. Sure. We're like the teens. We're cool.
Yeah.
We're cool kids now.
Practically
making our way. Yep.
Yeah.
Wait, your kids in first period are watching us on TikTok.
Yeah.
Well, the teachers.
So be hip and listen to us. And then we also have our own website at threefilmspod.com where we have all of our merch, our Patreon. You can just find every single episode that we do there. So yeah, that's where you can find us. Go check it out. Tonight, unfortunately, our guest was taken by Candyman. So it's just going to be the three of us that you're listening to. But hopefully, we can live up to what we did a year ago, and it was just the three of us all the time. So
we were in contact with him, and he's like, "One sec, I want to try this Candyman thing." And we're like, "No, don't."
He's like, "This is bullshit. It doesn't work."
We're like, "Dude, don't."
He's live streaming while he was doing it. It's like, did you not watch the movie? Like, it's not real.
It was pretty shocking. I'm proud of us for soldiering on. That was pretty shocking stuff to witness.
It really was, but this is the way that we deal with our grief is by recording.
Yeah.
I also didn't think I'd be talking about the movie already, so I had like a joke intro lined up. So I'm going to power through it anyway. So everyone's pretending you didn't hear anything for the last 2 minutes. I definitely just stole this completely from Matt, but I think it's kind of a fun thing to do. So this week we are going to be discussing a modern remake of a classic 90s horror film starring an actor that stands at 6 feet 3 inches tall, who will also be starring alongside Keanu Reeves in an upcoming fourth film of a franchise. No, I'm not talking about It, starring Bill Skarsgård, who's going to be in John Wick 4. I am talking about Candyman, starring Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who is going to be probably Morpheus in the next Matrix movie, which is pretty exciting.
The only thing that matters to you is still here. I know it's why you're still fighting and why you will never give up.
You don't know me.
No?
So we are going to take a trip down to Cabrini Green as we talk about Nia DaCosta's Candyman, which also stars Teyonah Parris, who was in WandaVision. You probably remember her from there.
I do.
And Coleman Domingo, who was in stuff that I'm drawing a blank on right now. So when I saw him, I was like, I know that guy. Why do I know that guy? I'm going to cut all of this out.
I didn't have that experience, so I'm like, I don't know.
Like, I don't know this guy.
I didn't recognize you.
What did I see him in?
Oh, wait.
He's in Euphoria and Zola. That's what I saw him in.
When he first popped on screen, he's like, you kind of don't really see him that well. He's like kind of far away. I thought it was the dude from The Wire. Oh, what's his name? Oh, shoot. Cuddy. I thought he was Cuddy from The Wire.
Cuddy.
I don't know what his real name is, but anyways.
But it's not Coleman Domingo, because that's this guy's name.
It's not.
Who I recognize from Zola and also in Euphoria.
Wouldn't it be funny if it was Cuddy from The Wire? And I was
it really would. Like, there's no way it's this
guy. Yeah, no. It's Zola.
Definitely not that guy.
It's the guy from Zola.
Yes. This is like kind of a I've seen people throw out the term spiritual sequel. As we were watching, I was wondering, is this like a reboot or a remake? I still don't really know how it falls in. I think it's kind of like that 2018 Halloween, where that's what they say is the direct sequel to the original Halloween movie. Even though there's been like 6 other Halloween movies, they're like, oh no, this one's just a sequel from the original movie. I think that's how they're treating this, because there is a Candyman 2 and a Candyman 3.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
I think they've said like, no, forget those. This is the new direct path. The new timeline is this.
It's like a retcon. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is the 2021 Candyman.
Ooh, this gives me hope knowing that about this movie. It gives me hope for they can redo the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. They can do it with Candyman. This is like proof of concept. People will be okay with it.
Yeah, if you remake it well, it'll be fine. Once the books come out, just redo those last 2 seasons.
Do-overs.
So yeah, we decided we're going to do Halloween movies. You've just listened to, hopefully, the Ernest Scared Stupid episode. And before that, we talked about Scream. I picked this because when I saw the trailer, I was hooked.
Oh.
Hooked.
Ouch.
Immediately hooked.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
look at
I
you
was
with the
like,
puns.
This looks so good. Like, I don't know if you guys have had that experience. Like, I felt that way with Guardians. I'm trying to think of other movies where I just saw the trailers. Like, I don't really know anything about this, but the trailer is really like, I just feel like this is a movie for me.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to report that I was right. This movie was so good. I loved it, and we're going to get into our thoughts on it. But yeah, this kind of felt like a great retelling of the classic tale and another Chicago movie, which we've talked about quite a bit recently, and just kind of about the landscape of America. So I know this was a first time for all of us, but Tyler, I want to throw it to you to just hear what your thoughts were on the movie. What was your experience with it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here. Like everyone by this point knows. And if you don't know this about me, go back and re-listen. All episodes available on Spotify, Good Pods, wherever. But, you know, scary movies just aren't really my thing. And so I think I actually have seen the original Candyman.
Oh, nice.
But I don't remember anything about it. It just...
Do you repress it?
Yeah, I think I had like, you know, I create my own headcanon. Matt likes to point that out. So I think I created my own personal story.
Nick Miller's Candyman.
Yeah. Nick Miller is not Candyman, but he for sure is terrified of Candyman, having grown up in Chicago. But no, in all honesty, like when you initially pitched this, I just was like, I can't get out of this. I have to watch this. But then we sort of changed what we were going to do a few times. And it's not even so much that like I had fun watching this, right? So it's not so much that after I watch a horror movie, I never come out of a horror movie thinking like, oh, I never want to watch another movie like that. Typically, when I do watch one, I typically enjoy it to some degree for the most part, probably because I'm pretty selective of the stuff that I choose to watch. So I don't know. I guess all this
You're not
rambling
subscribed to Shudder. You're not like watching all the horror movies every night.
Right. Yeah. It just is kind of like there are some that I end up seeing for whatever reason. I typically enjoy them, but I never want to watch them. And that's exactly what happened here. I thought it was really, once I knew Jordan Peele was involved, I was like, okay, I'm going to be into this. Like the cinematography was really cool. I love the concept of the spirit living in the mirror. That's sort of, I love the mirror world concept, and
so cool.
Yeah. Like I liked a lot about it. I liked the social commentary. I liked the actors. But having said that, I'll probably never watch it again, but you know, I had a good time with it. You know, what else could you really ask for, I guess?
What about you, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, similar to Tyler similar to Tyler on several levels. I'm not a horror person. I've probably seen more horror. I feel like I surround myself with a lot more horror people. So I end up, you know, take on secondhand horror watching. But I'm not a particular fan of the genre, but I do appreciate a good horror movie. But you put Jordan Peele's name on there, and then I feel like there's a certain stylistic and quality standard that you can count on, just because his brand is kind of just over his, you know, his directorial work has been really great. And I know he didn't direct this, but I feel like since he was initially attached to the project and, moved into a more production role or producer role, they had to have been very selective on who they felt could, hold that quality.
Oh yeah.
And that style. And so Nia DaCosta does a really great job. And so all of a sudden, like just knowing that his production company's, involved, it becomes more than a horror movie to me. It's not just horror. It's also, more artistic. And not to say that like other horror movies aren't, but like, you know that you're getting a product, it's going to be in his brand. So
yeah, I think for me, just like what you were just kind of saying, it kind of like drove it home for me. It's just that I trust him, right? Like with any random horror movie, because I'm not like a big like Hollywood trivia guy. Like I don't read about who's doing what or whatever. So I don't know who's making stuff, right? So like, but I know Jordan Peele, if I see his name on, I'm like, oh, I can trust him that it's going to be the type of horror film that's not going to like be it's a type of movie that will be worth me getting past my reservations, right?
Well, and honestly, like I like Ben, like I saw the trailer and I was hooked. Like they use those paper figures, which is super awesome. So cool. Like such great storytelling. But like we started up the movie and I'm watching with Angie, and when it shows that it's produced by Jordan Peele, she like had a sigh of relief. Like,
oh, nice.
It was like, oh, okay, like I can power through anything to watch, a movie that he's produced. So
right.
Yeah. He's not just gonna like throw in jump scares to mess with people.
Right.
He's not like doing gore. I mean, obviously our experiences Get Out and Us and the Twilight Zone, which he helped produce as well, that new remake. So having his name attached to it has been honestly kind of a mixed bag, I think, in terms of the reception of it, because I understand why people are like announcing it as Jordan Peele's Candyman, but really he was a producer. It's like calling this like, this is Kevin Feige's Shang-Chi. It's like, no, I mean, he was like involved for sure, but this is like someone else. Granted, Jordan Peele did help write it. He had more involvement, but I just don't want to take away from what Nia DaCosta did, because I think this was so beautifully shot. Like I loved the choices that she made. I'm so excited to see what she does on this Captain Marvel sequel. The Marvels is what she's doing next, which I think is just going to be so cool. I'm just, the fact that whoever made that decision, I'm assuming saw an early cut of Candyman. It's like, yes, she knows what she's doing. Let's give her the Marvels. Cause like, that's a big project, to
I
do
didn't
that
know
with.
that she was doing that. And now I was already excited to see like anything Marvel, but now I'm like even more.
And it's going to tie in with the Miss Marvel Disney Plus show. So they're both going to be in the Marvels. So I think that'll be kind of cool.
Rad.
And to your point, and like I said earlier, like Jordan Peele moved away from this project, and he's going to put in someone who could, hit it out of the park. And I feel like Nia DaCosta absolutely did.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. He's still got a, not necessarily a reputation to uphold. I think he's not worried about that as much as just like he wants to put out a good product. It's under the Monkey Paw Productions. And I think this lives up to everything else they've done. I really like the movie. There's a ton of exposition in the movie.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I think that's also why we get like rewarded with a 91-minute runtime, because I think other movies spend that other hour like not doing exposition and like doing the backstory. So like it was kind of nice to be like, oh, when's the last time we watched an hour and a half long movie? This is so good. But the trade-off was having a character kind of like Coleman Domingo, who was just exposition. Like that's all he was there for. It's like, I'm going to tell you everything that happened. But it's good because like people like me who haven't seen the original Candyman, like I've since, done some research on it and seen like what was tied together from that first film. And I'm like, oh, they explained it well enough though, that I was on board. I was following what was happening during the movie. It was great. Yeah. They also did it in some really unique ways. Like when he rented out that tape cassette from the library, when someone was like recording what happened with the original Candyman at the time of like when the first movie was set. So they did it in unique ways, but there was also just like a lot of it. But I don't know how you get around it without making this a 2 hour and 15-minute movie. And so I feel like there's going to be complaints either way. And I was happy with what we got. I'm always down for a 90-minute movie. I can commit to whatever.
I was super stoked to see the runtime. And for me, like watching this movie, it felt like listening to a ghost story, right? Like because of the exposition, it really did feel like you were listening. To me, it just worked contextually because like we're just listening to a ghost story where we also can actually see it playing out in front of us. But it was just kind of like listening to a story around a fire or something, camping or wherever. And so to me, it just worked. I didn't even think about the exposition because it just like it fit contextually for me. So,
and we're on record for wanting movies to be shorter. And honestly, there's nothing I would have added to this movie. Like I didn't want it to be longer at the end of it. Like this is exactly what I wanted. So it was perfect.
For me, I felt like I was like, yeah, we just got everything we needed and we're done. This is great.
Exactly. You know? And yeah, to your point, it's crazy you say that because I paused the movie when her brother starts telling this story and I turned to Ashley and I was like, man, like urban legends are really just kind of like ghost stories, huh? You know, and it's just like, yeah, you know, it's kind of like, you know, watching Blues Brothers, like, man, this is like a musical. It's like, yeah, it is. You know, so it's like, yeah, urban legends kind of are like ghost stories. We're just not sitting around a campfire. Like we're just like telling this stuff. And it worked so well in that sense. And I complained about the exposition, but honestly, it didn't hit me until afterwards. I was like, man, there was a lot of like just explaining stuff in there. But while we were watching it, it's like, oh, this all kind of flows with the idea of a ghost story, you know, that kind of a thing. So
yeah,
I think it worked really well along those lines. I mean, I just kind of want to talk about the horror genre in general and some of the themes that this movie hit on, because I think, you know, Jordan Peele talked about when he made Get Out that it was a social thriller, which I think made a lot of sense for any of you that have seen that. And I feel like that's kind of a lot of what his company is doing. The Monkey Paw Productions, they're doing a lot of social commentary, social thriller kind of movies. And this felt no different. I mean, this one was probably more on the nose with the message, you know, and some of those lines were amazing where they're talking about, you know, like the white people made the ghetto. And then once they realized what they had made, they kicked everybody out so that they could like build high rises and stuff. And it's like, man, some of the messaging in this was really powerful to me. Like I really liked what they had to say about, you know, gentrifying neighborhoods. And it's like, yeah, they bring artists in because it's cheap. But then once the artists are there, it's like, well, now let's crank up the cost of like the rent and stuff like that, because now it's a gentrified neighborhood.
Who do you think makes the hood? The city cuts off a community and waits for it to die. Then they invite developers in and say, hey, you artists, you young people, you white preferably or only, please come to the hood, it's cheap. And if you stick it out for a couple of years, we'll bring you a Whole Foods.
And that was a huge message, I think, as part of this, is just like kind of like moving out communities of color from places that they live, in theory, just so that like white people, you know, they can gentrify areas and make it, I don't know, different than what it was. But this story, I think, told us so well because it's almost like the trope of like building on like a Indian burial ground kind of thing. Like it's like you built here, but this is kind of a haunted place. And I think that was kind of a cool trope for them to go into with this movie, because Cabrini Green was where it took place for that first Candyman movie. So this like continues through. I just kind of want to hear you guys' thoughts. I know I'm not really making a lot of sense. I'm just kind of rambling, but I just want to talk about horror movies in general. So many of them are used as commentary, whether it's like Night of the Living Dead or, you know, Invisible Man, about like, you know, believing a woman and what she's saying, you know, and like there's just so many things that I feel generally the horror movie does the best, or, you know, the most explicitly, is like on being like a social commentary. So yeah, I just want to throw that thought out there. Matt, what were your thoughts while watching this?
Well, first, I think in talking about gentrification, I think it's something that like, it's such an eye-opening theme and thing that's happening, you know, even now in the United States of America, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. But like for the majority of white people, it's sort of a new concept that like we just haven't, it's kind of been hiding in plain sight for most of our lives. And we haven't held a candle to it in the way that we have over the last, you know, few years, especially through movies. And it was just crazy because I had seen Boys in the Hood by John Singleton several times as a teenager, and just never understood Furious Styles, Lawrence Fishburne's character's speech on gentrification, which, like, to me, that explains it probably better than anywhere I've ever heard. So if you're wondering more about gentrification and want it painted clear to you, go watch Boys in the Hood.
It's called gentrification. It's what happens when the property value of a certain area is brought down. Huh? You listening? Yeah. They bring the property value down. They can buy the land at a lower price. Then they move all the people out, raise the property value, and sell it at a profit. Now what we need to do is we need to keep everything in our neighborhood, everything, black. Black owned with black money.
Yeah.
But then it comes up again in Last Black Man in San Francisco. These themes of gentrification, they're heartbreaking, and it's awful, and it's great that they can use movies to sort of highlight the problem and educate on the problem, because I mean, it's something that we don't even recognize as happening until it's already been done. It's like, oh, great. Like San Francisco's been completely done, you know? And anyway, as far as like the horror genre and using some of those themes, I feel like one thing that Jordan Peele's done a great job of is it's I mean, how often do we in a horror movie, we go down the checklist of things that we would do differently than the protagonist in our heads, and like this idiot, like turn on the light, don't turn around, call the cops, like do something different than what you're doing right now.
It's the Jamie Kennedy scene from Scream where it's like, don't say you'll be right back. Like, don't do all this stuff. Like, what are you doing? Yeah. Yeah.
And with Jordan Peele in his movies, and then in this movie as well, with Nia DaCosta, these characters aren't falling for that. Like, they're doing all the things that they should be doing. But what they've done differently is there's a real horror in the everyday lives of some of these characters that eliminates those options. Like, we're given a believable reason why they wouldn't directly call the police. We're given a reason why they wouldn't go straight to the hospital when his hand's decaying. Yeah. It's like he's delaying his healthcare because there are real concerns that he faces for being black and for being in that community. So, or being in that social status. And so it's like they're taking real things that people have to worry about in addition to the horror that's happening on screen. Whereas like, before, it's like all we have to worry about is just like, oh, this is an escape. Like we're watching teenagers, you know, go through horror in a house. It's like, no, not only is the Candyman out killing people, but they can't call the cops.
Exactly. That was like, the ending reminded me of the Get Out ending, you know, where you think the cops are showing up and he's there on top. You know, it's just like, oh no, he's going to get busted. Like he wasn't doing anything. And then they give us a switcheroo. It's like, oh, okay, this turned out all right. But this one, like the cops show up and it follows through, I think, with everyone's worst nightmare. And it's like, oh my God, like everything she just went through. And now this, like, it's, I don't know, the way they handled it, I think was very well done. But it's just like, oh, this was the other side of what Get Out could have been at the end. And this time they just went through with what is unfortunately probably the more realistic ending of how this would have gone.
Yeah, it's funny because like when you talk about the way that it ended and how it went exactly like we, you know, thought it was going to go, and how we talked about how explicitly it talks about the theme of the movie, and but by which I mean gentrification and you know, social status and access to, you know, a nice place to live, all those sorts of things. That was like in some ways that wasn't necessarily a complaint that I had with the movie, but it was sort of something that I was like clocking mentally as like anticipation for a complaint someone else may have, in that it was so directly pointed. Like there was no nuance to it. It was like, oh, they're talking about gentrification because they literally just told me they're talking about gentrification.
Yeah.
And there was some part of me that was like, not necessarily that I wish they would have been more nuanced, because I feel like sometimes when you're trying to get across a point like that and a message like this movie's trying to get across, like maybe let's just say it instead of like being all cute about it. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's not necessarily that it bothered me, but I did notice, I was like, oh, they're not trying to be like clever about this at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And some of it, like it's just like right out there when he's telling him what the concept is behind his art piece, and the guy's like, oh, the South Central is so played out, like do something else. You know, it's like sometimes they're really just on the nose with what some people you know, might be thinking, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, I kind of appreciated that it wasn't so nuanced, but I, if you want to make the argument, hold on, Jasper wants to get up on my lap.
Okay.
If you want to make the argument that doesn't work for you as for a movie, then that's fine.
Yeah.
That was a little treat for the YouTube viewers watching me wrestle my dog.
To get on the last Portland show,
But yeah, no, I appreciate that they're telling that story. I live in a highly gentrified neighborhood in Portland, and it's always the case, like, this is the neighborhood I can afford. And it's like, it's the up and coming neighborhood. And so I move here and I get a place. And it's like, God damn it. Like, of course, I moved to like the most gentrified neighborhood in my city. Right. And the same thing was true when I lived in Salt Lake. Like, I spent most of my time living in Rose Park or parts of South Salt Lake or, wherever that were like slowly becoming more and more gentrified. And, I don't really have a point on that, but it's just like, it definitely hit home for me because I'm like right in the middle of what this movie is talking about. I'm in the middle of the projects being bulldozed and the luxury high rises being occupied by millionaires, right? Like, for sure. I'm in that middle ground. So it was like, it's always interesting for me. Like, we watched Do the Right Thing. Like Matt mentioned, The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Like, it does certainly feel like you said, Matt, that it's becoming more of the conversation instead of the subtext, right? And in some ways, I think that's what this movie did. They're like, we're taking the subtext and we're just going to make it the text, and then we're going to build a horror story around it. Yeah. So
I think they did a great job with that too, of like tying it into our protagonist, Anthony, tying it into his like desire to focus on it, because it seemed pretty natural that he's got writer's block, for painter's block. I don't know what that would be called, but like, he doesn't know what to do. And then he finds out about Candyman, and he starts doing his research and learning about how these neighborhoods were torn down and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, this is naturally fitting into the story really well. So I believe why this character is so invested in the Candyman story, why he's going to visit, some of these projects and things like that. Like, none of that was lost on me, which I think was great, because I was wondering about that through the trailers, where I was like, well, like, is he the Candyman, or like, why does he get involved with this? Like, all that kind of stuff. So I think,
and if this is a sequel, why are you saying it? It's real, like, if this is plausibly in the same timeline as those other movies, like,
100%.